OK, let's turn to the world of tech now, because from March, Apple users in Europe will be able to download apps from rival app stores. As it stands, Apple only permits iPhones and iPads to use its own app store, and it takes a hefty cut, charging developers up to 30% commission on downloads. But after a long fight, it's now been forced to change its policies by new EU competition rules. Our technology editor, Zoe Kleinman, explains.
The way the system currently works is if you're an Apple customer, you can only get your apps from Apple's App Store and you can only make payments using its own systems. Apple says this makes its products more secure, and it is true that you tend to get less malware on them. But developers have to jump through lots of hoops to get Apple's approval to go on the store, and some of them also have to pay big commissioning fees. And of course, for customers, there's no choice. If the app they want isn't in this one place, they can't have it. Since 2020, you haven't been able to get the app for the hit game Fortnite on the Apple App Store because its creator Epic says this is unfair. The EU hopes that opening up Apple's ecosystem will make it easier for both customers and businesses to find more choices. But Apple is warning that it will also come with increased security risks. There's no chance of this happening here in the UK at the moment, although we do have proposals for similar legislation to the EU going through Parliament right now.
Sorry, Kleiman. Now, Matthew Howard is the founder of Assembly Research, which looks at legal policy and regulatory issues facing the digital economy. And I asked him how big a setback this is for Apple.
I think it is hugely significant. I think this is a historic change to what we have seen with Apple and the way that the App Store currently works. I think it is not just either a sort of piecemeal approach by Apple to potentially comply with these rules that come in from March across Europe, but a completely consolidated effort by them to do things differently. I think it remains to be seen whether or not the developers who have been looking to get access will be happy with what has been proposed. There, of course, still are fees for using alternative app stores, albeit less than the ones that are currently paying Apple. But I think the biggest pleaser that has got to be won round is the European Commission itself, which has got to decide whether or not that what is being put forward by Apple is in the spirit of those rules that they must comply with in a few weeks' time.
Well, Phil Schiller, the Apple executive who's in charge of the store, did say that this was the best solution. It's particularly when it came to protecting privacy and also those security threats of users. Does it bring an increased risk of security?
I think Apple for a long time has obviously prided itself that its closed ecosystem is the best way to achieve that security and privacy and generally good experience that consumers have had up until now. I think they have made it very clear that they're not at all happy with what is being proposed as part of the DMA, and they see this as a route to increased malware, as Zoe was saying, and also scams and impersonation. So they've made it clear that they've tried to do the best they can by putting in place different sort of requirements, but they're saying that they can't take away all of that risk entirely because they lose that control. I guess we need to see the sort of reaction from the other developers as to whether or not they think that is material, in which case they will probably stick with Apple and pay those higher fees that they currently do through commission.
So this ruling, or rather these changes, are EU only. Are we likely to see the same thing happen in the UK eventually?
I think we will. There is a very similar piece of legislation that is moving its way through at the moment, the Digital Markets and Competition Bill. It mirrors very closely what is currently in force across Europe. In a way, that actually works slightly to our advantage, I think, because we need to, at this point, work out what the Commission's response to Apple is as part of this. They might say that they need to go further, in which case they could put in place requirements, or they could even take enforcement action. I think us being able to watch a little bit the Commission's reaction to this enables the UK to sit back and decide the best approach to take when it comes to Apple. I think the other thing worth mentioning is that Apple has also looked to comply with rules that are coming from Europe, particularly in messaging, the ability to message from Apple devices to Android devices and that user experience. And they've already sort of introduced rules that go beyond what the regulation asked for in Europe. So there is a high chance, I think, that they will look to comply anyway.
And that was Matthew Howard there speaking to me earlier.